Patrick Netherton Show, 1130 The Tiger. He's Rogers Hampton. I'm Patrick Netherton. Pleased to have you with us. And we're very pleased to welcome in, for the first time on the Patrick Netherton Show, been meaning to have him on for a while, and he wrote a really, really good piece. The college football playoff semifinals, and wrote a really nice piece about it, about the family trying to kind of come to terms with the grief and move forward with that. And we'll talk about that coming up in just a bit. But Brody Miller from The Athletic down in the Baton Rouge, New Orleans area joins us. Brody, how are you, man?
I'm hanging in there. How are you doing, man?
You know,
Thanks for having me on.
That's all we can do in 2020 is just hang in there. I think that's
I know, that's my motto these days.
That's the 2020 motto. Hey, just hang in there. Although, unfortunately, the motto for 2020 is just hang in there. We got something worse coming right around the corner.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll have a few more storms, I'm sure.
No, there's no telling. Look, this has been obviously a very interesting time with the confluence of so many things going on between the pandemic, Black Lives Matter. We're seeing the college athletes especially understand that they have a voice. I mean, hell, we saw Nick Saban leading a Black Lives Matter, I don't want to call it a protest, but a march, if you will, trying to find more, answers and social justice and all of that. What's this been like covering what's happening in college athletics right now? Because I'm in college athletics at Northwestern State, and this is the weirdest time I can ever remember.
Yeah, it really is fascinating, and it highlights so many things that exist in college sports, because I think, college sports is generally set up to be a structure that, I'm not even saying it's like intent and malicious, but it's coach and logo focused, and the players are kind of not exactly put in the forefront. They can't really talk about many things unless, they're directly interviewed, and they, so much of it, they're not allowed to gain money off of anything, all these things. So it's been really fascinating to see how much has changed in the past, 9 months, I'd say, where you're seeing players take stands on things and actually being able to highlight their voice and to, be negotiating and have a seat at the table for things like players' rights and NIL, or even just safety measures that they're actually taking stands on. I think it's just cool to see, because I think for so long they just flat out would not have been able to do that. I mean, pro players have been rising in that area for the last decade or two, but college, it really hadn't happened. So it's cool to see. It's almost more frustrating to cover because we're not allowed to talk to them most of the time,
right.
But it is cool to see it happen.
Yeah, and you add into that, we're seeing a new dynamic, and you mentioned the college coaches have always been somewhat insulated from world events. Occasionally they'll be asked to comment on something, but for the most part, they just kind of do their thing. They've been in their own bubble for a long, long time, but now you're seeing the players sort of dragging their coaches into the fight, so to speak. And I know Ed Orgeron spoke on that. Obviously, I just mentioned Saban leading a march. I think that, to me, is maybe the most interesting thing, is watching these coaches who largely have been insulated from this have to now make a stand, or have to now start to have this dialogue with their players, and they're being drawn in.
I know. I think you are 100% right, and I actually have a column coming up in the next hour or so about Ed Orgeron and the very tricky waters he's having to maneuver right now this past week, because, listen, things are tense in the LSU locker room. That's just a fact. I think, there's a decent amount of the locker room that's pretty frustrated with Ed Orgeron, that, certain political comments he's made in the last month. And he's not somebody who ever talks about politics, but he got pressed. It became a national thing, and now everyone's talking about that. And you have a roster full of black players who suddenly they're hurt that their coach feels this way. And, I think you have that going on, and you have players opting out and players transferring. And I think Ed Orgeron's just kind of in a tricky spot, where I think Ed Orgeron is one of the most apolitical people in football. And most college football coaches, I would argue, are pretty apolitical, but
right.
Ed Orgeron is. But I think he's finally realizing that, you can't do that full time anymore. 2020 is just different, because he said he loved President Trump because he was just respecting the office, but he wasn't thinking of how it's going to make his players feel. And, he said, he talked to Pete Carroll, his mentor, about advice on this. And he said, hey, my motto has always been block out the noise, but I'm learning that can't apply to everything. That can't apply to blocking out what's hurting my players and what's affecting my players. So I really do think it's been a wake-up call for Ed Orgeron. I think you're really going to start to see him listen and really be involved in these discussions and try to be a part of it. Because, hey, I say, even after criticizing him, I'll say, the one thing I give Ed Orgeron the most credit for is how good he is at adapting and listening and making changes. I mean, that's the thing that made him the best story in college football last year.
Yeah,
so
that's 2019 2019 in a nutshell is him going from Ole Miss to USC to LSU and adapting and changing. Also, let's not forget he was the first college coach to be out in front of the, hey, wear the mask, social distancing. Yep. I mean, he was doing ads for that thing months before anyone else was.
It's true, yeah, and I almost think that's kind of what got him in trouble in a way, is that he was so forward on that. I think he thought he was a little bulletproof, but yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think he is the golden child for adapting, listening, changing, realizing. I remember one of LSU's trainers put it best. He's like, most college coaches, they get where they are and they think they're the smartest guy in the room. They became a head coach at LSU, for example, and they're like, I got here because I'm so smart, and they're going to just do whatever they want. And the thing that people give Orgeron credit for is he never lived that way. Because he failed so bad at Ole Miss, because he's been through everything he has, he always assumes other people know things and that he might not be correct. So I think he really does know how to listen, and I think he will in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, you mentioned blocking out the noise. The problem is you can't block out the noise from inside.
Yep.
You can block out the noise from outside all you want, but you can't block out the noise from inside.
You're absolutely right. I think there's some, like I said, I mean, yeah, for example, there was the players' protest on Friday, and they didn't tell him about it. They just missed the players' on team meeting and just went to protest, which I think Orgeron's probably happy they were protesting, but he doesn't like that, they didn't feel like they could tell him about that. So right. I think that's something he definitely has to manage.
Talking to Brody Miller from The Athletic on LSU. All right, so is LSU going to field a team this year? Is there anyone left to play at LSU at this point? No, I joke, but no, we've seen kids hitting the transfer portal. We've seen guys opting out. We've seen folks heading for the draft. I mean, from last year to this year, this is going to be a pretty different LSU team out on the field, is it not?
Absolutely. I mean, they were already losing, I believe, 15 starters from the championship season just to the draft and graduation. Now you add, depending on what you consider Neil Farrell, but he was at least a co-starter. They're pretty much down. They're losing 4 more starters, and if you look at their national championship roster, they only have 5 starters technically still on the team. So it's not good. But my answer is kind of a 2-tiered answer in the sense that I think LSU's ceiling just obviously diminished greatly. I don't think they're competing for the SEC anymore. I don't think they're really in the same tier as some of those other top 5 teams right now, because you lose Jamar Chase and you lose Tyler Shelf. Those are 2 potential first-round guys, and you lose so much talent. But at the same time, they are going to be all right, just because, first off, at LSU, they're always going to recruit well. But 2, the areas getting hit are kind of the areas that they're strongest at. You can't replace Jamar Chase, but at the same time, they're pretty darn deep at receiver. Terrace Marshall could be a top pick. He's had 13 touchdowns last year. He's the third banana. He's a guy who's a stud. They love Racey McMath. Tariq Gilbert's a tight end, but he's going to probably catch 40 or 50 passes this year. They have a 5-star in Kayshon Boutte. They're like 5 or 6 deep of guys that would probably start on most SEC teams at receiver. Or they've lost 2 defensive linemen, which is a brutal hit. But still, they got Glenn Logan's a returning starter at defensive tackle, and Apu Ika they think is going to be a star, as a sophomore. And it's tricky where they're losing a lot, but they're still fine there. They're still going to be a competitive team. I still bet they go 7-3. But I do think that ceiling is definitely gone.
If you're going to have a year where everything gets fouled up and guys leave and folks hit the transfer portal, why not this year, right? This is already going to be a weird zombified college football season. So if you're going to have all of this attrition and all of these things happen, better to have it now when I think almost everyone gets a pass on this season.
No, I think that's a fantastic point. They were already playing with house money, and now it's even greater because now with everything happening these last 2 weeks, they are going to get the benefit of the doubt on everything because everybody knows what just happened to them. So, every game they win, it's like, wow, good coaching job by Ed Orgeron. Right. So I think there's something to that. And even just to go a step further, if you really want to play the optimistic card, you compare it to the 2018 season, where that 2018 season was kind of messy. It was really inexperienced, wasn't exactly a ton of upside. but they found a way to go 10-3. They gained a lot of experience, and then that 2019 came in so experienced, guys who were battle tested together and won a national title. I'm not saying I'm predicting a national title in 2021, but now you're going to have more young guys and more sophomores and juniors playing, and now you're going to go into 2021 pretty battle tested, and it's not like the talent isn't there. You just need that experience. So, yeah, I mean, there's ways you can definitely spin this into a positive, but it's going to be tricky.
Well, and those kids are going to be battle tested, but they're not going to have lost a year of eligibility.
True.
So, I mean,
absolutely.
That makes it even better.
I'm fascinated to see, like a Terrace Marshall, for example.
Yeah.
I assume he goes to the NFL, or a Racy McMath. I assume they leave, but you never know. If the year doesn't go like quite how they expect, they could totally come back, and all of a sudden you still have the best, one of the top 10 receivers in the game. It's possible.
Talking to Brody Miller from The Athletic. So give me a name, maybe a name that people aren't aware of, a young guy or, a guy that not many people know that you think steps up and makes an impact this year, a guy that kind of, I don't say comes out of nowhere because everyone that LSU recruits has a name, but who's the guy that is not a household name right now that you think will be after this zombie 2020 season?
Well, I guess one I'll throw out specifically because of Sheldon leaving is Opelika, which I mentioned earlier. I mean, Opelika, 350-pound guy, pretty darn agile and pretty athletic. I think he's a guy they love, and he showed it during the title season a little bit. But now that he's going to be starting nose tackle or one technique, I mean, I think he's a guy who could really become a household name. And then Damone Clark probably falls in that category, too. I think people do know who he is, and they do know he's the next guy. But, I mean, he has a chance to really be the next, because they're on a crazy run right now of middle linebackers going to the NFL. So I think he's the one who really, is a just freak athlete, could be a superstar for them. And then if I want to throw out a long shot, I think with the receivers leaving, one guy to just throw out there is hey, maybe he might be the surprise star is Coy Moore out of Metairie. He's somebody who I think he was a low 4-star, not one of the big names in their class or anything like that, but he's been really turning heads so far in camp. And, I'm not predicting he wins the starting job without Chase, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's a guy who really carves out a solid role.
How old are you, Brody?
I'm 26.
Okay. Well, I was gonna hit you with an Iko for Apu Iko, but I'm guessing that reference would probably fall completely flat on you if I tried to hit you with. That's an '80s song.
I was going to try to lie to you, but I don't know that one.
Well, go look it up. It's by the Bell Stars, called Iko, and maybe suggest it next time you get to chat with him, and suggest maybe he should use that as his theme music from now on. All right, now,
I think that's the move.
Yeah, now on to unfortunately some serious matters, and a really, really good piece, very poignant piece that you wrote about Carley McCord. As the Northwestern State play-by-play guy, I know her well. We talked a lot. We chatted a lot about the industry and life and career and all of that stuff. And so obviously that was a massive loss that when she died in that plane crash before the college football playoff semifinal. You went in and you talked to her husband, Steve Ensminger Jr., and you talked to the family, her father, her mother, her brother and sister. Tell me about kind of how you decided that you wanted to write this story, and then what that was like emotionally going through and discussing her with her close family.
I think most of us at this point in our lives have lost somebody pretty close to us. And I think the thing we all experience is, especially with something like Carley where it was so public, it's the number one story in the country for a few days, and it's all anyone's talking about. And it somehow got tied into a football game and Steve Ensminger and all these things. And it was so in their face for so long, for a few weeks. And then it just went away, right? That's not anyone's fault, just how news works. And, everyone was in their face at the one moment they didn't want it. But then, the hard part is what comes the next 9 months, when, for example, when the brother Carson's planning his wedding and realizing his sister's not going to be there. That's when it really gets hard. So I really just wanted to spend some time with them and just be like, go talk about something that literally everyone goes through in their life, which is how do you move on without the most loved ones in your life? And, I think you asked about just how challenging it was to report it. I have to admit, those families were so incredible that it wasn't as hard as I expected it to be, because they were so transparent about how they feel. And so they had come to terms with so many things, even the hardest parts, even the parts that they don't want to talk about, So it was pretty amazing and inspiring to talk to them, and how they lean on each other and how they're handling it. I mean, I would go home and talk to my girlfriend and just be like, after talking to, say, Karen and Tracy McCord about losing their daughter, and I just hug my girlfriend because I'm just like, this is what marriage is supposed to be. This is for better or worse. So I really just have to give the shout out to those families who are so much stronger than I could ever imagine.
Well, and the thing that resonated with me, and it's in so many ways, and you mentioned it in the story, it's the look, right? It's someone recognizes them, and the first thing you wanted, and I also liken it to, sometimes you see you see a handicapped person, or you see someone that's struggling through something, and you have that immediate sympathy for them. And your countenance changes, how you look at them changes, and it's from a place of caring by you, but it's differently received by them. Kind of talk me through what they were telling you about the look and how people try to sort of share in their grief and give compassion, but how it's somewhat differently received.
Yeah, I think you put it so well too there. It's this interesting thing of, I mean, if people weren't, nagging them with condolences and giving them the look, they'd probably be a little annoyed, does no one care? It is like a fine line where you do want that, but then it gets to a point where you don't get it, especially, and this is the part that breaks my heart most, is just how public Carly's was. It's not like, when I lost my mom and it's my small community and that knows about it, and then I still go through my day-to-day life and no one knows. I mean, everyone in the Baton Rouge area knows about Carly and knows about their family. So I think that is the tricky part. And I love them telling the story of just how, that first week, so many people were at the house constantly. The family stayed there. Friends and family were coming in constantly with, desserts and flowers and all these things. And by, the 6th or 7th day, Karen McCord had to just literally kick everyone out and say, nobody's allowed in our house, just because sometimes you just got to grieve a little bit in private, or so it is this fine line where you want people to care, and they loved how much publicity this got because it showed how many family and people Carly touched, and that meant a lot to them. But they also needed to grieve in their own way, and I think that's the hard part we all struggle with. Yeah,
and look, you kudos to you. You did a really remarkable job with it. I cried. I was sitting in a restaurant eating lunch, and I was crying. And I mean, I kind of don't appreciate that part of it because I'm crying in the middle of a restaurant. If I'd known I was going to cry, I would have, read it in private somewhere. But no, look, it's a great story. It is a great telling of how you move on, how you deal with grief, and the people around you. And look, you and I both know, and I don't know how well you knew Carly. I knew her okay. I wasn't her best friend, but she and I had a lot of conversations about a lot of things. And kind of, I guess, ironically, she would love the fact that she's getting attention, but obviously not for the reason that she's getting attention. You know what I mean? I mean, she would.
No, her sister said it perfectly. Her sister was laughing about it, and she's like, as morbid as it is, this is the most Carly way for it to go out, because Carly was a very extreme person. We all know it.
Yeah.
I think she's like, I bet Carly would have loved the fact that her death was national news and that everybody, was, and I think there's something beautiful in that, to be able to laugh at hey, this is how Carly would want to go out in a way. I think there's something to that.
Yeah. Well, look, I tell everyone all the time, we have a ton of your brothers and sisters from The Athletic on, and I tell everyone it's worth the subscription. If you haven't gotten it, do it. Get The Athletic, everything from Saints and LSU news, national news, all over the place. And look, go read Brody's story about Carly McCord. It will give you a good cry if you're looking for one, get you a little bit emotional. You did a great job with that, and continued success down there. Hopefully we can catch up to you a little bit before the season gets going, Brody.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I really genuinely enjoy talking to you. Take care.
All right. Brody Miller from The Athletic, LSU beat writer.